Welcome to the MaxBet Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything gaming. I'm Landon Jones, here with Mike McKiskey. Let's get started.
What is going on, my man?
What's up, man? Why do you always schedule these interviews so early in the morning?
people when they're available, bro. Just got to meet the people where they are. So if they're available in the morning, we do it in the morning. I know you like sleep until noon, but that's not the program we're running here.
It's not even that. And by the way, I don't sleep till noon. Thank you, world. I sleep past noon sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, just people aren't like awake and ready for an interview in the morning. Like, I'm still congested. I'm still trying to work out my nighttime
third
tears,
cup of coffee, or your next Red Bull. Yeah, I guess it's just me. I'm up and early. Like, I got kids. Bro.
You have kids,
so
yeah.
I don't wake up. If I wake up past 7, it's my birthday. Like, that's it. So it's really that easy. So by 7, I'm like, yeah, getting them figured out, doing that whole thing, and then I'm by 10:15. It's like may as well be 3 p.m. I'm ready to go. We're in it. So a little different lifestyle funny. You're living, man.
My dog sleeps in, dude. I get out of bed sometimes, and my dog will just stay in the room for 2 hours.
If I was your dog,
shut the doors and the blinds, buddy.
If I was your dog, I'd sleep in too, man. You got the greatest life. You live in downtown San Diego. You have a dog park right outside your house, which you can 3 to 4 times a day. He's going to go play with all his buddies.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? He'd be sleeping on the couch. That big window you have. Like, he's probably, who's going to be not excited to move to Vegas? Blue. Little boy Blue is going to be a little bummed out.
We talked about it last night. He's not bummed.
Did he start howling? He's like,
no, he didn't start howling, but I know that last time I tried to move to Vegas before the world shut down.
Pre-pandemic.
He wasn't pumped.
Well, you locked him up in a Marriott.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Let's be different. So, this time you can send him to my house. I got a yard with a dog. They can play. If he gets lonely, I'll
yeah, dude, I lived in like a DoubleTree for 2 months almost. And then I get a knock on my door and they're like, "Hey, COVID, we're kicking town out." I'm like, what?
What? They just told you
I'm
you
in
gotta
this
go?
shitty hotel and now I have to leave. Yeah, that's why I had to fly to Nashville.
Because they at least give you a cookie on the way out. DoubleTree, known for the cookies. Did you get a no?
No, but Blue got a dog treat. You see how this world is?
Well, we all like him better anyway. It's just part of the deal.
I agree. I like him a lot too. Not more than myself, but
oh man.
What's up?
You been gambling?
Man?
Nothing, brother. Just kind of cranking, doing it, waiting. I'm eagerly waiting for my rollerblades to ship. So they haven't shipped yet. So just update on anyone asking me. I can't tell you how many texts I got going, "Oh, I want to see Big Man on Wheels. I want to see it happen." So just waiting on that. So as soon as I might have to call them and go, "Hey, what's the status?" You don't know. People are eager to see this probably fail video of me scooting down the driveway and just cleaning clock. But
I oiled up my bearings and my wheels. I'm ready to go. So
I wouldn't have even known to do that. I would have just been
dry
bearings. No good. Oh man.
You
been gambling lately?
Not a lot, other than just the online stuff for the slots channel.
Yeah.
But
you win anything? I've been looking at a lot of your bonus rounds and stuff. It seems like it's been fun.
In the casinos. It's fun. Like, we win, we lose. Sometimes we cash out. It's a lot of fun though. The online space is fun for sure.
Yeah.
We've had some big wins. We've had some big losses. But we're just doing it responsibly, bud.
But you've had a lot of fun. Drinking a lot of Topo Chico. Right. So you're having a good time.
Tons of Topo.
And for anyone that wants to follow along, head over to TikTok, MaxBet Media.
Yeah.
Check Landon and our boy Kevin out. They I don't think they should be allowed to have that much fun, but they make it work. So that's exciting.
We've had 1 million views. Over
Really?
1 million views in a month. Yeah.
What? How? Yeah. You're internet famous now, buddy. I didn't even know that. That's great.
I do love the fact that there are these like trolls, I guess they're called. I'm not a social media expert. Like, these people are just like, "You guys suck. This is fake." And we have this internet community that, like, call it the fan base, that protect us.
Really?
They're like, "Leave them alone. They're just having fun. Why don't you go somewhere else, you troll?" It's like, yeah, get them.
Yes, get it. You're just watching back going, yes, get them.
Wow.
So funny. Well, the comments war is real. That's hilarious. Yeah, I've been fortunate to avoid, I guess, so far on this platform, the trolling, right? Like, everybody that talks to us, I think, generally positive. And if they're not, they're going, it's mostly because they know us and they're like, "Hey, you fumbled that question, didn't you?" Yeah, we did.
Someone disliked the Brian Green video, though. Like, we're not huge on YouTube. We just started our YouTube. It's fun. We're moving video. I mean, obviously more downloads on the podcast, but someone just big thumbs down. Like, I want to know who that guy is. Like, you hated it that much that you had to go push. I didn't like this.
You're like, he's a good guy. What happened?
Yeah.
It's probably someone that doesn't like the Rams. I
Or
feel
one
like
of
that's
us.
probably, or well, if they didn't like us, they'd thumbs them all down. But like, it's something there. But anyway.
Speaking of gambling though, who do we have this week?
Ooh, Jennifer Shatley is her name. So March, if you don't know, we didn't know. We, thanks to Jonathan Michaels now with Sightline for telling us that March is a Problem Gambling Awareness Month.
Yep.
So we immediately said, well, who do we talk to? Because we want to promote responsible gambling and
100%
doing the right thing. So he pinged back. He goes, Jennifer is your gal. So she, we'll talk to her in a minute, but she has a long history. She worked for Caesars for close to 20 years in, the responsible gambling compliance element. She's been consulting on this now. She's advised the governor of Nevada. She's sit on national boards and councils for responsible gambling awareness. So we got a hammer coming in, I guess, to talk about a topic that's it's not always fun. Like no one wants to, we all like to go roll the dice and have the taxables, but we don't always like sitting back going, gamble responsibly, but we should, right? So this is, today we'll do our small part and trying to help everybody stay on the right side of the line.
When the fun stops.
Yeah. When the fun stops, you call the hotline. So before we get to her, it's interesting. So I've been talking to a lot of different executives, different companies, just a lot of chatter going on. And it feels like there's a lot of folks looking to do new things, not employment wise, not like they're looking for new jobs, but they're taking their companies to new markets or new verticals. Right. And the consensus seems to be like, everyone's kind of just asking each other, well, what do you think? Well, what would you do? And it's like, well, I'll give you my 2 cents. But one thing I would say is call our friends over at Eilers and Krejcik Gaming, because they have a whole consulting service where they have market research and all these things. And I think that's the biggest thing that's missing generally, right? When you go, hey, should I enter the XYZ sports business or should I do this type of thing? It's like, I don't know. I think outside looking in seems smart. I have no idea what the numbers are, but they do. So I think that's a thing that we've been talking a lot more. And I know talking to Todd and Adam over at EKG Gaming, they're busy and they're definitely active right now. So anyone looking to do something new and branch out, that's definitely where I would
it's like we talked about adding the right sports book to your property, right? They're looking at all the different companies in different areas and different regions. And one might be good in New Jersey and one might be better in, Nevada. Like it's so different. It's almost slot sales, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't take advice from a slot salesman in San Diego for Vegas market. It's just a different market.
Yeah. So. And speaking of new markets and sports betting, so I'm actually interested in this, not necessarily from the Eilers perspective, but just in general, it sounds like the Barstool Sportsbook is going to go live in Illinois this week. So I guess by the time we post this, it'll have already been live, but it's going live like right now, which is they're late to the game, right? Like they weren't first. And I think it's just because they didn't organically own the property there. So they've kind of partnered their way in, but that'll be interesting because in Michigan, they came out hot and that was all everybody started at the same time. They're a huge social media marketing machine, right? So number one, it'll be interesting to see, back to the Eilers reporting, like as month 1, month 2, month 3 goes on, do they have that same swing or is it sticky? Like when you look at BetMGM, who was there from the beginning, DraftKings there from the beginning, do they hold, right? Like, do they say, no, you can't take up once we have them, they're ours, right? Or is it like, well, no, we're just going to go play with the guys that we like and we'll see. So I'm interested to see how that evolves.
Barstool has that brand power to be able to pull though from a sticky brand. So
if anyone can do it.
You don't know, man. That's first to market usually wins, but Barstool kind of drives that message through the sports community in terms of
that's just it. So you're going against 2 types of stickiness. So you're saying, well, if I'm a local MGM player, this is my app, but I'm also a fan, right? On the sports media side over here, like which is stickier, which is a more powerful pull, or do you just play both, right? But I guess we'll see, as the numbers start to come out. So for that future, dissection or for whatever you want to know on market research and things for the gaming industry. And if you need somebody to consult for you, ekgamingllc.com, go check those boys out and they'll treat you right.
Yeah. Tell them the Max Bet Boys sent you.
Tell them the Max Bet Boys sent you. I don't know if that'll do anything, but hopefully get you a faster response on email. So all good.
Yep. And if you're listening to us on the podcast store, we also have a new YouTube channel. I guess the podcast is on YouTube now at Max Bet Media. Check us out, like and subscribe. It helps us out, driving our numbers. But yeah, man, let's jump in to the interview, and we got Jennifer on the other line.
Bring her on in. Jennifer, welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So then, yeah, I'm always interested. So when we're chatting to people, it feels like they get into the gaming industry just totally by accident. So that seems like maybe there's something there too, because there's no casinos in Tennessee. So how did you go from maybe UT graduate school to, a career in the gaming industry, and how'd you make that jump?
Yeah, it's not the natural choice in Memphis,
Right.
Tennessee in the 90s. I mean, gambling completely was illegal in the state. Like, they have lottery now, but at that point, gambling was illegal. But Harrah's was actually part of Holiday Inn, and Holiday Inn was founded in Memphis in the 1950s. So Harrah's used to be headquartered in Memphis in the 90s. And so they were, a big employer. And so I worked for a gambling company where it was absolutely illegal to gamble.
Nice.
But it was good. And then they relocated out to Vegas in 99. So not long after I joined, they did decide to relocate out of Memphis.
Interesting. I guess putting a gambling headquarters in a non-gambling state is a good way to make sure that the employee base at least stays responsible. They're not just getting, getting high on their own supply. Feels like what I want to say. I don't know if that's the right phrasing, but they're not just spending their whole night in the casino.
Right. We could drive down to Tunica. Tunica was a huge market, and it's not far out of Memphis, but yeah.
Interesting.
But that was the first casino in Tunica was Splash, and there were lines for hours to get in, and you actually had to pay an entrance fee. I mean, this is how pent-up demand was for gambling. You had to pay like $25 just to get in the door.
Jeez.
That was the heyday of the old Tunica market. Yeah, exactly. It's not that way now. Now they're paying you $25 to come in to get the door. Wow, that's amazing. So how did you choose, or I guess, how did you end up in the responsible gambling side of the business? You mentioned you spent, the better part of 17 years as an executive in that area. Like, was it just one of those things like, hey, we need somebody, we like you, and let's take it on? Or is that a passion of yours? How'd that start?
I had to put it in context first.
Yeah, please.
So responsible gaming wasn't created until 89. So it was still relatively new. But in 2000, Harrah's created this it was called the Code of Commitment. And it was basically this ethics statement of how we're going to operate as a company and how we want to be judged. And all of these things. And it had commitments to employees, to customers, and to communities, and then later to the environment. But this was really the first statement in the industry around that. About 2 years later, the AGA created the Code of Conduct based on sort of that Code of Commitment thing. And as part of that really was they wanted someone to operationalize this code. And it was looking at, what are we doing right? Where can we improve? And really the area in that. And so the job itself had all of these things that hit my sweet spot. So I was in market research. So it had all these research components of what are we doing? Where can we improve that? It had a lot of regulatory and legal issues to it. I had gone to law school, so that was interesting to me. And then it also had all of these, how do you even communicate this code internally and externally? So it had these communication things. So it seemed custom built for me.
Wow, right.
So I got in it. And as I started really researching the area where you could really innovate, because it had been really stagnant, was responsible gaming. Because in the 80s, when it was created, there's not a lot known about it. It was really just put up some brochures and a phone number, and that was kind of it. And then, I thought we could really do something more here, something much more meaningful and innovative. And then I started looking at the processes internally, and they were so archaic and cumbersome for employees that it was just, we could obviously do something there as well. So I kind of fell into that portion of the code, and then that became my career for the rest of my time there.
How was that perceived in, I guess you said it came about in 1989, or problem gambling, I guess it was Harrah's, correct? Yeah. They created a program around problem gambling. How was that perceived in the industry originally? So obviously Harrah's was kind of backing it, but what did other people around the industry think about when that kind of came to fruition?
Well, I think that, I think casinos were seeing this issue on their floor. They didn't know how to name it. They didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so once you had a company that came forward and kind of acknowledged it and said, this is what we can do in that aspect, I think they were welcoming of that, because at least it's happening. We have to deal with it. And this gave them a way to deal with it.
Yeah.
And actually the program that Harrah's created in 89 went on to be the model for the regulations that was created. Wow. So even the legislatures didn't know how to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
So it kind of helped set the stage to really set up how to handle problem gambling from that perspective.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. When you look at legislature or regulators, either way, I mean, whether it's law or just regulation, for a lot of things, you can point to it and say, well, here's the line, right? So like speed limit, easy example. You're going to go 35 on this road. And if you're going higher than that, you're a violator, right? We can speed if we want. Hopefully we don't get caught. But how do you draw that line in problem gambling? Like, at which point do you say, well, now it's a problem? Like, how do you, because I would imagine that line is probably so individual that, like, at which point do you say, okay, well, now it's a problem, and now this is where we as a company or as a state have to step in and say, no, you can't cross this line?
Well, I think there's a distinction there. So problem gambling, really, there's this diagnostic criteria, and basically it's when gambling starts causing problems in your life. So it could be financial problems, it could be, in your family, it could be at your employment, it could be mental problem, whatever it is, because it is a mental health issue. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. People think, oh, why don't you just walk away from the table?
Right.
But it is an actual addiction. So there's that side of it. So there's this clinical issue, but then when you start looking at responsible gaming, so what we're regulating is responsible gaming. We're not regulating problem gambling.
Okay.
So once someone becomes a problem gambler, there's really nothing the industry can do. What they can do is sort of give them information on resources and assistance that they can seek out, but there's nothing really that you can do from an industry's perspective. So when we talk about responsible gaming programs, and I think this is really a confusion area for a lot of people, they're not problem gambling programs. Yes, they have components that give information to people that need it about problem gambling if they need resources. But what responsible gaming programs are prevention programs. So they are your target market for responsible gaming programs is your entire customer base.
Right.
So what you're trying to do is tell them, there are risks involved with gambling. Give them sort of this informed consent. So giving them information about odds, how the games work, information about how to keep it a entertainment activity, like setting limits, not gambling with money you can't afford to lose, expecting to lose. So kind of giving them these tips around gambling to keep it within that healthy sphere. But the problem is, because everybody thinks, oh, well, this is a responsible gaming program, that's a problem gambling program, they ignore it.
Yeah.
So your entire customer base is the target, but all of them are like, well, I don't need that. I don't
have a problem. Yeah, exactly.
Right. They're not problem gambling programs.
What's the distinction between the two? So you've mentioned like problem gambling and then responsible gaming. So are those two different sections, or is responsible gaming kind of like the program to problem gambling?
Responsible gaming really is. It is the whole concept of how you should gamble. So it is about this, keeping it as entertainment. Okay. What gambling should be. It should be responsible.
Like a guideline between responsibility. Okay.
And then problem gambling is when you cross over into this diagnostic disorder and it's causing significant problems in your life and you shouldn't be gambling.
Right.
Yeah. I think the way I'm trying to think of it, so tell me if I'm way offline here, is if I think about something that other people might have a quote unquote problem with, is like you think about drinking, right? So if you're saying, like, if you go to a casino or a bar, they're probably going to say, look, if you look a little sideways, we may just tell you, hey, 2 is your limit, to just kind of be responsible. Don't drink and drive. They're going to tell you those things. You may still do it anyway, right? You may still have way too many and make bad choices. And then at that point, you have to almost self-identify, or hope you have a friend that goes, bud, you got a problem. You need to go talk to somebody, right? Like, and that's what this would be, right? I'm assuming, like, to your point, if it's mental health and it's an issue where, it's ruining your life, it's going to be because your spouse or your buddy or whoever, your parents came in and said, dude, you lost your rent check trying to chase red black. Like, you need to go, this isn't good. And so I'm assuming it's a line similar to that, where, like, you almost, it when you cross it, but usually it's probably somebody else telling you crossed it, is my guess.
It is very similar to that. So it is about giving them all the information up front of how to enjoy the activity, but it's up to the individual of if they're going to take that risk, and then how they're going to engage with that activity. And then the person, and that's another thing is this is a complex mental health issue. Yeah. It's not, and I think a lot of training and a lot of responsible gaming programs, or this expectation is that as an employee, you can just spot problem gamblers. That is a complete fallacy. This is something that they can hide from anybody. And honestly, when they're in a venue, this is where they want to be. This is where they're enjoying themselves. It's when they go home that the problems are occurring. And when you look at diagnostic criteria, it's all internal states. It's not something you're going to visually see somewhere. And a lot of times people don't even recognize that they have a problem themselves, as you said. And that's why with Problem Gambling Awareness Month is really trying to get education out there. What is problem gambling? What are those signs? So you can help identify it in yourself or in a loved one, to sort of bring that to their attention, and then get them to those resources that can help them.
Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself, like, there's a bunch of people out there that, maybe don't drink every day. They don't have an alcoholism problem, but maybe 3 times a month or 2 times a month, the times that they go out with their buddies, and they can't handle alcohol, and they're just idiots anyways, right? Their friends are carrying them home like, gosh, this guy's got a drinking problem. But the next day he gets up, goes to work, doesn't drink that night. Obviously he just sucks at drinking, right? So is there, and then is the same in the gaming business. So people, they're not like addicted gamblers. They're not always going to the casino, but the times they do, they might, lose a little more
Go
than
a
they
little
had to
far,
lose, or, but then it's not necessarily a problem. They just suck at gambling. And I mean, is there a correlation between those? What is that?
So you look at gambling, there's sort of a continuum. So it's either no gambling over here, and then there's like recreational gambling, and then you get in this at-risk area, and then you get in a problem, and then you get an actual disorder. So when we talk about problem gambling, there's clinical disorder of a gambling disorder, and then there's problem gambling, where there's problems that are occurring in your life, but you haven't reached this clinical condition. And then you're also at risk. So I would say what you're describing is probably that at risk, but people can move up and down this continuum.
Right.
So they could have episodes of at risk or problems, but then move back down the continuum. So, sometimes you may be having problematic behavior, but it's not significantly affecting your life. And so that's what a lot of responsible gaming programs really are focused around, is trying to get people to recognize if maybe they're moving into that problematic area, and to make changes in what they're doing in their gambling activity or behavior, so as not to move into that problematic area, to keep it within that recreational range.
Fascinating.
Interesting. So what if somebody is now convinced they have a problem? So we're talking about problem gambling awareness. So let's say I'm spiraling and Landon has now convinced me, Bud, you need help. I raise my hand. What do I actually what services are there? You mentioned there's services available, but what are some examples or some places that I could potentially visit to say, look, help me out. I don't want to lose my whole mortgage payment on the dice table or whatever. Where would I even go?
Right. So all of the casinos are going to have an 800 helpline number. And that helpline number is actually to speak to someone that's going to refer you to resources in your area. So they're going to refer you to GA meetings. They can refer you to clinicians. They can refer you to counseling. They can actually do financial counseling. So maybe that's your issue. So there's a lot of services at that 800 number that you see that number plastered everywhere. I know.
Yeah. And it's the same number, generally speaking, it's probably one main hotline, or does each casino set up their own number?
It's one. So it is one national, and this is where it gets complicated.
Generally,
this is the process. So there's an 800 number that's the national number, and it's run by a call center somewhere else. But all the casinos in the jurisdiction use that number. Now, there's some jurisdictions that have their own special number. Some of those special numbers still go to that call center. Some people just get really attached because they have this is our number. Yeah. But there is a national phone number. It's 1-800-522-4700. There you go. The number that you can call to get resources. But that really is the best way. And then there's also the casinos themselves have programs like self-exclusion. Mm-hmm. So self-exclusion is sort of this agreement that I'm having problems. I don't want to come back to your venue. And if I do, then I want to be removed. And then you build in these deterrent mechanisms as an operator. So one thing we did at Caesars was if someone wins a taxable jackpot that we have to physically go pay out, we would not pay them that jackpot, and we would donate that to the Nevada Council or to some problem gambling organization. Lots of jurisdictions do that. But there's these other tools that you can use that the casinos can offer, like self-exclusion.
Wow.
Interesting. And you can take that taxable because they've raised their hand up front and said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. So then you're basically removing the reward. So now they're like, well, that chase that they're having. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's sort of a deterrent mechanism. So they don't want to. They're not supposed to be there. They're not supposed to be there. And you're trying to give them sort of deterrent mechanisms so they don't come. But honestly, because it is such a complex mental health issue, I've seen circumstances where someone was self-excluded. They got into the casino. They were playing. They hit a jackpot, and on surveillance, they ran. Because they knew they weren't going to be paid, and it wasn't, so they weren't gambling for the money. And that's what people think. Well, people gamble for the money. They didn't care about the money. It was being in that action, and it was that sort of endorphin rush or whatever it is that they came back for. So it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
You seem like, listening to you talk about it, though, you seem very passionate about the industry and trying to help people overcome addictive gambling or problem gaming. What kind of drives that in you? It seems like you're just so passionate and you've been in the business forever. So what drives that for you?
I just feel like it's such a sort of the moral compass of the industry, sort of, this is how we want to treat people. And then when you think about gambling anyway, about operators, it's all about customer service.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how I position responsible gaming. It's about how do you take care of your customers? So whether it's making sure they get the right drink, or, making sure they don't wait in line, or making sure they're happy with their accommodations. It's about making sure that they're keeping this a fun activity, because it is about the customer at the end of the day. And obviously, none of us in the industry want to see people suffer. We don't want our product to hurt anyone. I think, understanding that and knowing that there are things we can do, and there's things we can do better. I think that's another thing that drives it, is the research, is trying to figure out how we can do even better and keep people from suffering harm. That's what kind of motivates me.
Yeah, you mentioned the research, and I know that post Caesars, you've been also doing some work out here at UNLV with our friend Bo at the Gaming Institute. So what I'm assuming that's focused on the responsible problem gambling kind of area. What are some of those things that you're discovering that we may be able to do better, whether as players or as operators for the business?
Well, one of the things, so I'm actually at UNLV getting my doctorate in public policy. Wow, and so as part of that, I'm working at the International Gaming Institute as well. But one of the things I'm looking at is, so when I was at Caesars, we created this program that was a responsible gaming ambassador program. So when you look at most responsible gaming programs, especially at the time, because we created this in 2003, so that was 18 years ago, they're very stagnant. They are very self-initiated. So if a person says, I have a gambling problem, you kind of give them a brochure, and that was the extent of a program, or you give them a helpline number. So what I had created at Caesars was this concept of, we're going to have all of our employees, again, from this customer service perspective, listening to customers. And when they say things that cause concern from a responsible gaming perspective, it could be a direct statement, I got a problem. It could be, I just lost my rent money. It could be, I don't have fun here. I don't know why I keep coming back. Whatever that statement is that caused concern for an employee, we had them report that. And then we had these people called ambassadors go speak to the guest. And it wasn't an intervention. And that was something I had to convince people when we were doing this concept. You're basically, all you're doing is checking in with the guest. And we did kind of structure the conversation around this concept of motivational interviewing, which is a psychological technique. And basically all you're doing is kind of reflecting back to them of what they said and making them think about, well, why did I say that? And maybe I should make a change to what I'm doing in order to, figure out how to change why I'm saying these types of things. So again, it's that prevention idea of, you're recognizing something's going on. Doesn't mean they have a problem, but it means something is going on, and perhaps they can think about it and change their behavior and not become in this problematic field area. So what I'm doing now at IGI is trying to create a training program around that's online, because we did a lot of in-house stuff, but and really make that available to the larger industry.
So going to online, and this is a perfect segue. So obviously in brick and mortar, in a casino, you're going to have that personal touch, that self-awareness or awareness of your guests. What are you guys doing to combat problem gaming online? So is it are they completely different steps of how you kind of identify problem gamblers, or is it easier to reach out to people if you think they may have a gambling problem? What are you guys doing to kind of combat that, and what are the differences?
Well, first, we don't identify problem gamblers.
Okay, thank you.
We promote responsible gambling, and that's what we're learning. It's a difference.
Oh, you got to say it twice. Now we all know.
What we're doing is promoting responsible gaming. But I think online in some aspects is a lot easier for responsible gaming, because you have these built-in tools. You have the customer has the ability to set limit on their gaming activity for time or deposits, or how much they're going to spend, how many times they're going to come a week, and that's automatically something they can do within the product. Whereas you don't have that in bricks and mortar. We tell people you should set limits, but we don't really give them the tools to do it. Yeah. And then also with exclusion. So with exclusion, again, with bricks and mortar, they're not supposed to come back. And if they do, we kind of remove them. But online, if they do an exclusion, they can't access the product. So it's a little bit easier to do it there. But in terms of interactions, it is a lot more difficult interaction wise. But at some point, there's chat functions going on. There's some kind of interaction with the guest. Where you could kind of have this one-on-one sort of virtually or not with the guest.
Can you set limits with cashless? So if we move towards the cashless system, and you could set limits to be able to upload on your card, or
I would assume so. Yeah.
You can. Well, and that's
okay, cool. So asking the wrong person.
I'm going to talk to a legislative issue as well. Is most of the cashless and the online have these tools. But if you don't, cashless specifically, if you don't require the operator to turn it on, then it's kind of useless. So the cashless tools have it, but it doesn't mean the operator is going to turn it on. And in the legislation, I'm pretty sure in Nevada, they didn't require that. They didn't require responsible gaming tools. And that's something that anytime we're looking at new technology, we have to look at how is it going to affect the customer and how can we build in responsible gaming controls. And it's not enough to just have them. They have to be turned on. Like, it has to be accessible by the customer.
That's interesting. I never really even thought about that. I guess, what would be the downside of turning it on? I mean, that some people would set limits and there's some money that you lose, but it's probably not the money you want anyway, right? So I'm just curious, it's so obvious once you say it, but then I never would have even crossed my mind that it wouldn't just be on as part of the tool.
I'm not sure why you wouldn't turn it on. I just think, there's some operators that they're very compliance based. And if the regs say you do this, then they're like, okay, I did that, and I'm done. And they don't think about, oh, well, I should also do this, but because it's not required. So it depends on how you're looking at the issue, I guess.
Maybe you just get so busy checking boxes, you stop to step back. You don't step back and look and go, well, wait a minute. Like there's a whole other thing that's not a box to check, but would be smart to do.
Right. I don't think it's nefarious on the operator.
No, for sure. Well, I was going to ask that because I think earlier it feels like, one thing to Landon's point earlier, when Harrah's maybe comes out with this as responsible gaming, like my immediate thought, because I'm cynical or whatever you want to call it, is like, well, they were probably getting a lot of fingers pointed at him going, well, you guys are morally unsound, or you guys are taking all the money. Right. And it's like, well, no, we're trying to do it responsibly. So it feels almost like the political counter, right? Like, and again, maybe it's just because it's 2021 and everything's political now, but I'm laughing. I'm going, it's a smart program, right? Because we've seen other customers and, I talked to the folks up in Canada quite a bit and they have pretty strong responsible gaming initiatives because they're government run. And they're like, no, we're gaining money. We actually are still growing the business, even when we identify and potentially restrict, different access points. And so, yeah, it's a good thing. It's, but yeah, I don't think the casinos are trying to be shady by not turning it on. I think it's, to your point, just somebody checked the box and that wasn't a box. Right. So, so where does the burden on that fall? So I guess in that scenario, you go, well, that's up to, in Nevada, I guess you would say is that state legislature, or does that become NGCB, or is that a little bit of both? Like who's responsible for putting those boxes on the paper? So when the casino's complying, they're checking all the boxes.
Yeah. It goes through all of it. So if it's legalized, usually the regulatory body is the one that creates the specific regulations around it. So it would be either Gaming Control Board or
So are there like any questions that we haven't asked you that you kind of want to get out to people to kind of like help make them aware or help educate us in terms of
what are we not asking? Because we don't know enough about this. I feel like we're the students here, so help us understand.
I think one of the complications that operators need to be aware of right now is COVID effects.
Interesting.
And it has multiple effects. So when you think about, first, I think there's this pent up demand. I mean, we've all been trapped around for a year.
Sure.
Yep.
So everybody's going to kind of go out and probably overindulge in everything because you're trying to make up for this lost time and get these experiences that you missed out on. And so, that could be an at-risk behavior for gambling, that people that normally wouldn't have issues may now have issues because of that. And then there's also this aspect of, there's a lot of people have experienced things that have traditionally contributed to problem gambling. So, loss of a loved one, social isolation, high stress levels and anxiety, loss of employment, loss of at least some of your income. I mean, these are things that all of us have experienced. And this may put the customer base that's coming back at a higher risk than they normally would have been. And it's something we just need to be cognizant of and really look at enhancing our responsible gaming programs at this time, maybe retraining employees, having more communication efforts around this issue on property and in the public. I think that's a big thing. And then there's this whole concept when people go back, we say responsible gaming is about, gaming is about being social. It's a social activity.
Yeah.
Well, now we're social distancing and we're wearing masks and we're putting empty seats in between gamblers and we're putting partitions up between the gamblers and partitions up between the employees.
Yep.
So how are we going to engage with customers? How are we going to really interact with them and make this a social activity and sort of respond to them if we think there's issues going on, because we're going to be so distanced from them.
Wow.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I never really thought of it that way, the other way.
Yeah.
I guess, I'm looking at it going, yeah, of course we're all pent up demand, but part of me is also thinking, well, I got a few extra dollars because I haven't been spending it. Like I haven't been able to go to the movies. I haven't been able to go out to dinner as many times as I'd like. So it never occurred to me that those things could also then fuel the other side where you're saying, look, I've been lonely for a year. I've been a little bit bummed out for however long it's been. And now I'm going to go chase this kind of jackpot rush feeling. Right. And potentially do that in an irresponsible way. So yeah, that's fascinating to think about. Plus you mentioned the masks and the distancing. Some of the comments you mentioned earlier where it's like, hey, we identify, or we kind of have these conversations based on somebody going, oh, this isn't fun. Why am I doing this? And it's like, well, you might not hear that because between the mask and the Plex and you're going, well, what'd you say? Oh, and if you're dealing, you're probably just trying to get through it. You're not really going, well, what was that? Like digging in the way you might have when it's less barriers to be social. So yeah, that's fascinating to think about.
Yeah. And escapism is really one of the kind of problem gambling areas. Is people gamble to escape problems or troubles or whatever. And who doesn't want to escape the past year?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, we all got something.
I'm super curious now, and this is kind of a question we asked towards the end, but do you gamble? And if you do or do you have a fun experience that you can share with us where you went out and you didn't have to win a lot, but just had a great time with your friends or family? Or
I don't gamble a lot. And
obviously
there's sort of an origin story to that, though. It's not for profit gambling reasons.
Sure.
So when I started at Harrah's, I was in market research. And this was over 20 years ago. But one of the things that we did was, and every casino did it, we did competitive shops.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what that meant is I had to go to the Strip and gamble at almost every casino. And I had to gamble until I reached this theoretical worth calculated. And then I'd see what kind of offers I got in the mail. So you can make sure you're being competitive. But what that translated to was gambling on a slot machine on the reels back in the day for 11 or 12 hours a day for a week at a time.
Jeez.
And so I would go to bed at night and close my eyes, and my eyes would just like spin. And
Cherry's bells. Yeah.
And walking on the carpet, because it's so, there's so much going on the carpet. It looked like the carpet was moving. Like I had literal effect.
The floor is lava for you now. Yeah.
So I don't really gamble that much because I think just that experience in itself was enough gambling for my life.
Just burned you out.
Turn you away. That's too
so did you get any good offers as a result? I mean, it sounds like you're putting in some strong time. Did you get like a penthouse suite for your friends, or like what did anything come of it that way?
I get some really good offers, and I got to use them, which was that kind of the perk.
Nice,
so I got free rooms and stuff like that. And at one point I had a room at one end of the Strip and a room at the other end of the Strip. So depending on where I ended up at the end of the night, I would have a free room at either end.
That's hilarious. Just the closest bed. You go, okay, I'm over here now. We're just going this way. Go north.
That was like my buddy Matt. When 10 years ago, our roommate, he used to go play for stations. He used to go shop. And so I'd always go with him, and we lived together. He was my roommate. And so we had so many spa package days and dinners, because it wasn't always just like money. I was like, you have 10 spas that you need to use. So you're there and they're getting, get the little cucumbers in their eyes.
Hard to give it up, man. Hard to give it up.
Can't give it up.
Exactly.
That's part of it. I know exactly what Jennifer's talking about, but it takes a long time, and you can't just do like big bets. It's a certain amount. You got to get a certain Theo.
Well, and the great thing too, again, about this all being a social activity is, you're sitting there playing, you're just trying to play as fast as you can, get this over with. And at some point you hit something that has to pay out, and people behind you are like, oh, and cheering. And you're just sitting there like,
I want to go home.
You're like, oh,
this
is a work day. Yeah, exactly. You're like, even though I get to keep the money, it's still work for me. It's still the office. I'm going home after. Yeah. That's funny. Okay. So the other thing we ask is we do kind of this max bet challenge is what we say. So offline, you were, introduced to us as part of the Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And so that was great. But who would you like to see us talk to? So we're generally we love learning about the business, different elements. So is there somebody in the gaming industry that you go, they would be a cool interview, and whether they're doing something in problem gambling, responsible gambling, or just generally, like who might you want to see us go talk to? And bonus points if you know them.
Okay.
Introduce us. Yeah.
She's not in the industry, but I would say Brett Barbanel.
Okay.
She is at the International Gaming Institute. She runs the research. So she's like the director of the research for that organization, but she is an expert on esports.
Oh, wow.
And I assume that is an area that you're interested in.
Yeah, that is for sure.
She would be a great contact for esports, and she's just really interesting and funny. And she has some funny stories of being a child. She's a math genius, so being a child at the racetrack.
Me too. Oh, what?
And like calculating odds and stuff.
What?
That's perfect. It's funny. The last person we talked to, Brooks, he grew up around the racetracks too, and we were kidding with him. He's like, I was like, were you the guy in the basement, 15 years old with the pencil? He's like, No, but he goes, but you saw it, right? Like it was definitely there. So it's funny. It'll be interesting to hear her take on, I figured it all out. And maybe that's cool. So Brett, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to her. Hopefully.
And we are interested in esports. So we think we know. That's one of those topics we're like, we get this, but we probably have no idea. So that'll be a fun chat for sure.
Great.
I definitely want to chat with her. I love the sports section. I think
he just warned her that Landon's going to totally fanboy on that interview. So just be ready.
It's true.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, thank you very much. This was fun. Thanks for taking your time. And I guess responsibly, one more time, what was that number to call? So it's
1-800-522-4700.
700.
And I had one other question, just real quick before we wrap up. If I'm a small casino and I want to learn about a responsible gaming program for my property, who would I contact? Same number or?
No. So that number is going to be a problem gambling referral service. Yep.
Or a website or something.
There you go. I can consult them.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So Jennifer, look up Jennifer if you need a consultant to help you get started.
Yeah.
Boom. That's how we found you. So it's all perfect. So awesome. So Jennifer, thank you very much. And everyone listening, let's gamble responsibly. Huh?
Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.